Imagine building an empire with a pen. No trumpets, no grand invasion, just a winter signature that lets a private company rent soldiers, hire ships, write treaties, and one quiet deal at a time, take over a subcontinent 20 times bigger than the island it came from. Tonight, you'll see how trade slips into power, how a merchant guild becomes a state, how a rainstorm decides a battle before it begins, and how the very rails and schools that tightened Britain's grip would one day help India break it. Keep watching. Welcome to the War Dossier, where wars become stories, and stories explain power. Picture the world in the early modern age. To the west, a small, rain-soaked island, England. Not rich in population, not swimming in resources, outgunned by continental empires. And yet, within a few centuries, this island will dominate a subcontinent layered with languages, faiths and traditions older than England itself. How? Not with a single crusade, not with endless columns marching inland. The British arrive as customers. They become partners, then referees, then lenders, then protectors, and finally, rulers. The route is familiar in hindsight. Warehouse to fort, to garrison, to treaty to tax office. It begins not with a battle, but with a signature that acts like a fuse. New Year's Eve, 1600. While London's winters are damp and grey, a parchment dries under a royal seal. Queen Elizabeth I grants a group of merchants exclusive rights to trade with the East Indies. On paper, it's commercial housekeeping. In practice, it's permission to act like a pocket-sized government, to negotiate abroad, to sue and be sued, to fortify property, to police ships. The English East India Company is born, underfunded, underarmed, but strangely ambitious. At first, the company's eyes aren't on India at all. The Spice Islands beckon: nutmeg, cloves, mace, commodities that promise fortunes by the handful. The Dutch get there first, and they get there hard. They blockade ports, bully rulers, and build a clockwork system of ships and warehouses. The English, pushed aside, pivot. Failure in the spice race opens a wider door, the Indian subcontinent. What India offers is different. Not a scarce spice, but an abundant, renewable economy. Cloth, bright calicos, gauzy muslins, silks that feel like wind, pepper by the bale, indigo by the barrel. Europeans go mad for Indian textiles, and the company learns a rule it never forgets: wealth builds walls. Fort St. George in Madras starts as a warehouse with guns. Around it, a town sprouts: traders, weavers, porters, scribes. The same pattern repeats in Bombay and then in Calcutta. Each factory, the old word for trading depot, becomes a seed that sends down roots. Here's what makes these English posts different from earlier Europeans. The Portuguese arrive with cannons blazing, grabbing ports by force. The company prefers paper and silver. It rents land, it pays customs. It flatters local rulers and sprinkles gifts where they matter. Harmless traders, the rulers think. They bring specie and take cloth. No one sees the long game yet, not even the company. Because at this stage, the company isn't planning an empire, it's managing inventory. Meanwhile, India is ruled by giants. Under Akbar and Shah Jahan, the Mughal Empire stretches across most of the subcontinent. This is a world of gardens cut with geometry, courts lit by poetry, forts layered like geology, and roads where caravans flow like rivers. The state balances local power through revenue contractors and honours a diversity of faiths with a pragmatic touch, especially under Akbar's expansive vision. The economy hums. European visitors write home in disbelief. Cities that feel like entire countries, ports crammed with ships, fabrics so fine you can draw them through a ring. To a clerk in Fort St. George or a factor in Calcutta, the emperor in Delhi might as well be a god on a distant hill, present and yet unreachable. No plan drawn in London imagines dethroning him, but empires don't break when rivals strike. They break when their seams pull. time and pressure do the work. A system built on conquest needs new conquests to feed it. After Aurangzeb's long wars, the treasury heaves, the army thins, and tolerance narrows into policy quarrels that alienate former allies. Then the hammer blows arrive. From outside, in 1739, Nader Shah cuts into northern India like a hot blade. Delhi is sacked. The peacock throne, the Koh-i-Noor, gone. The emperor is still in the palace, but the empire is now a mosaic of provincial warlords paying polite compliments to a faded centre. And in that mosaic, a new force rises from the western Deccan, the Marathas. The Marathas are everything the imperial court is not: quick, lean, decentralised. Hill forts prick the sky like thorns. Cavalry darts in and out of plains, taking tribute, granting protection, disappearing into ridges. A confederacy of strong chiefs gives the Marathas flexibility and reach. It also sows rivalry. They can ride to Delhi and dictate terms, but unifying the entire subcontinent under one hand proves harder. To villagers, the Maratha horsemen are guardians one season and tacksmen the next. Hope and hardship, braided tightly. Into this shifting landscape step the Europeans, now with more confidence. The company has learned another rule: paper needs muskets. Guards to protect goods become sepoys, drilled in European fashion. A few cannons become batteries. Ledgers start funding garrisons, garrisons safeguard ledgers. Trade pays for force. Force protects trade. The flywheel turns. But Europe doesn't arrive as one. The French are here too, disciplined, innovative, allied to Indian courts from Pondicherry. For a time, they look ready to win the South. On maps in Paris and London, the subcontinent becomes one square in a global chess match. France and Britain grappling in Canada, the Caribbean, Europe, and now India. The French teach Indian battalions to drill and fire in line. The British do the same. Both sides promise loans, guns, and officers. For Indian princes, it's a marketplace for muscle. One English clerk refuses to stay a clerk. Robert Clave is not born into rank. He makes himself into one. First a soldier, then a gambler, then a negotiator who understands that in India, battles begin intense long before they start on fields. Which brings us to Bengal, June 1757, a province as rich as small countries put together. The Nawab, Siraj-ud-Dawla, wants the company caged. The company wants something else. Clive finds a key that fits the lock. Mir Jafar, a general with ambition. Promises are whispered, a throne, titles, gold. The company doesn't need to beat an army. It needs to break a coalition. And when the lines form at Plassey, the weather lends a hand. A monsoon squall drenches the Nawab's powder. The company's guns are kept dry under tarps. Clive's artillery thumps from behind earthworks. The numbers on paper, tens of thousands for the Nawab, don't matter if only a fraction fights. It feels like a skirmish. It changes a continent. Plassey proves three things. First, in a fractured landscape, treachery is cheaper than heroics. Second, artillery and drill let fewer men control more space than anyone expects. Third, and most important, Bengal's revenue can fund an army larger than most European states. With Mir Jafar on the throne and debts owed to his friends, the company taps a river of cash. India begins paying for the conquest of India. The timing is ruthless in its luck. The 7 Years' War roars across the world. Britain's navy throttles French supply. The Treaty of Paris in 1763 clears the board. France keeps a few coastal enclaves. The dream of a French India folds. From now on, the company's main adversaries are Indian states, not European rivals. Victory opens the door to temptation. Company officers, once salarymen, now sit astride treasuries and trade monopolies. Some grow fabulously rich overnight. Parliament back in London blinks. Can a private corporation keep a province? Should it? Committees investigate. Reforms are proposed. But out in India, the logic of expansion presses on like weather. The more land the company administers, the more revenue it collects. The more revenue, the more troops it can pay. The more troops, the more treaties it can dictate. Momentum becomes policy. To the south, Mysore refuses to be a stepping stone. Hyder Ali and his son Tipu Sultan modernize with grit and speed. Regular infantry, heavy guns, innovative rockets that would later inspire experiments in Europe. They fight the British to standstills and bloody setbacks. Seringapatam becomes a byword for siege and courage. But coalition warfare cuts both ways. Against Mysore, the company allies with the Nizam of Hyderabad and the Marathas. Bit by bit, the tiger is cornered. In 1799, Tipu falls defending his capital, sword in hand. A warning goes out to every court in India. Even the strongest can be isolated and brought down. In central and western India, the Marathas remain the largest indigenous threat. Their confederacy can sting in a dozen places at once, yet rival chiefs hesitate to obey one plan. British governors exploit those seams. Richard Wellesley, ambitious and theatrical, constructs a web called subsidiary alliances. Keep your throne, he tells rulers, but host British troops, pay for them, and hand us your foreign policy. It sounds like partnership. It operates like a leash. His brother Arthur, later the Duke of Wellington, tests his generalship here before Waterloo makes him a monument. By the early 1800s, Maratha power bends under the weight of repeated defeats and imposed treaties. To the north, another story rises. The Sikh Empire under Maharaja Ranjit Singh. He forges unity among misls, builds a disciplined Khalsa army, and draws on European advisors without ceding control. For a generation, the Sutlej River is a line neither side crosses. After Ranjit Singh's death, court intrigue hollows the centre. 2 ferocious wars later, Punjab is annexed. British officers write home about the courage of Sikh infantry. Indian memory keeps the pride alive long after flags change. Conquest is one discipline, governance is another. The company, still legally a business, slides into the role of a government, collecting land revenue, adjudicating disputes, writing regulations, training an army, building roads, and later rails. And because it is a business, its first question is always, what funds this? The answer, too often, is the peasant. In Bengal, the permanent settlement of 1793 fixes land revenue at levels that look predictable in ledgers and look cruel in drought. Elsewhere, new systems clip traditional rights and local commons. When harvests fail, tax demands don't. Grain moves to ports while villages thin out. The company will say it is bringing order and uniform law. Many Indians will say the order is a set of cuffs worn by someone else. The market moves too. When British factories roar to life, machine-made cotton pours into India cheaper than any handloom can match. Dhaka, once fabled for muslin so fine it seemed woven from mist, fades into poverty. Apprenticeships break, looms go quiet, guild knowledge evaporates from towns that had sold to the world for centuries. In London, politicians call this progress. In Indian homes, it feels like a theft of inheritance. Education and courts present a second edge. English schools rise in cities. A narrow slice of the Indian elite studies Locke, Blackstone, Shakespeare. The company insists it is neutral on religion, but its reforms, banning sati, regulating social practices, are read by many as intervention into sacred life. Missionaries, though not official policy, use the widened roads to travel farther. Suspicion spreads in barracks and bazaars. They will change our souls next. Some of that fear is rumour. Rumour doesn't need proof. Nowhere do these tensions coil tighter than in the sepoy ranks. The company's army is mostly Indian, commanded by European officers. Pay slips behind prices. Advancement is constricted. Religious obligations are underestimated or trampled by regulation. Ask men to swallow small humiliations long enough, and it becomes a question of honour. It takes only a spark. In 1857, a new rifle, loaded with cartridges rumoured to be greased with cow and pig fat, arrives. To bite the cartridge is to break faith, according to rumour. Whether the supply chain actually sent out animal fat grease everywhere is almost irrelevant by the time word travels. Belief is a match. Meerut burns first. Prisoners are freed. Columns ride to Delhi and hoist a fading dynasty into sudden purpose. Bahadur Shah Zafar, poet, old man, last Mughal, becomes a banner. The uprising rolls across the Gangetic Plain, Kanpur, Lucknow, Jhansi. Princes dispossessed by annexation seize their chance. Peasants settle scores with tax collectors. Rani Lakshmibai rides into battle and into memory. The revolt is fierce, courageous, and tragically disunited. Objectives clash, restoration here, revenge there, independence everywhere and nowhere. The British are stunned, and then coldly efficient. Railways push troops where roads would take weeks. Telegraph lines click orders across provinces in hours, not months. Reliefs grind through sieges with brutal determination. Atrocities on both sides scorch the moral ground. By mid-1858, the rebellion is crushed. Zafar is exiled to Burma. Gallows and firing squads finish what the battlefield began. But the world has changed. Parliament dissolves the company. India becomes a crown possession. A viceroy rules in the monarch's name. Queen Victoria's proclamation promises religious neutrality and equality before law. The army is rebuilt to rely more on groups the British categorise as martial races. Artillery, decisive in suppression, stays firmly in European hands. The Raj wraps itself in ceremony. Durbars, parades, pageantry that suggests timelessness. It wants to be seen as the final form of order. Look closer and you see contradictions written into steel. Railways and telegraphs, the pride of imperial modernisation, are designed first for moving troops and goods outward. In bad years, grain still leaves districts where people starve. The late 19th century is scarred by famines whose death tolls defy comprehension. Relief is shaped by economic dogma that worships market discipline, while bellies collapse. Balanced budgets rival beating hearts. The ledgers look neat, the villages do not. And yet, inside the very tools meant to bind India to Britain, something unbinds. The English language becomes a scalpel in Indian hands. Lawyers, journalists, and teachers master the vocabulary of rights and representation and begin to throw those words back across the table. Newspapers spark regional debates. Associations form. Courtrooms become classrooms where arguments sharpen. Education that was meant to supply clerks supplies critics. So what actually conquered India? Not simply British genius or Indian weakness. A small island did not crush a united titan. It made itself useful to a divided one, first as buyer, then as banker, then as broker, then as guarantor. It turned revenue into infantry, promises into treaties, treaties into garrisons, and garrisons into maps. A corporation taught itself how to behave like a state, until a state had to replace the corporation it created. What kept that conquest going? Ships, yes. Drill, yes. But above all, the ability to make enemies fight each other while paying you for the privilege of stationing your protection between them. Subsidiary alliances that sounded like safety and functioned like dependence. Reforms that were sometimes sincerely meant and often clumsily applied. A habit of calling extraction efficiency and dismissing cultural injury as sentiment. What broke the spell? Memory, hunger, and literacy. Families do not forget famine. Craftsmen do not forget broken looms. Courts accidentally teach rebels how to argue. Railways that carry cotton carry passengers with pamphlets. Telegraphs that send orders also spread outrage. Step by step, a national story coheres out of 1,000 local ones. Not a single India, but a gathering one, and that is the final irony and justice of this history. The signature that began an empire contained its limit. Power gained by paperwork and partnership can be stalled by paperwork and partnership turned against it. The same lines that stitched the subcontinent to London stitched people to each other. The same schools that trained clerks created leaders. The same law that jailed dissent also hosted its defence. If you remember only one thing, make it this. Britain did not defeat a monolith. It managed a mosaic. It bought time with loans, bought allies with titles, bought battles with betrayal. It built a machine where trade fed war and war fed trade. India paid the bill. But India also learned the schematic in the long arc of history that matters most, because the story doesn't end with the Raja's pageantry. It ends with the voices educated under it tearing away the velvet and revealing the iron and then the rust. When the empire finally buckled, India endured. The jewel left the crown and became a nation. The arguments, the rails, the newspapers, those did not vanish. They turned around. They spoke back. They moved people not just to market, but to meetings. They turned subjects into citizens. A pen began this story. It would help end it. Before you go, drop a one-sentence take. Plassey, bought or fought? I'll pin the sharpest argument. Want part 2, the corporate engine of empire next? Hit subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss it. Grab the companion map pack plus reading list from the first link in the description, and share this with someone who still thinks empires are built by battles alone.